What if everything you thought you knew about the zodiac, the 12 signs neatly carved into the calendar, the tidy wheel of fate and fortune, was never the whole story? What if the zodiac, that glowing code of destiny we've been taught to believe in, was missing a crucial key? Not a minor oversight, not a miscalculation, but a deliberate erasure, a vanishing act that took place centuries ago, removing a 13th sign that once carried the weight of wisdom, transformation, and danger. This sign was not just another constellation, it was a threshold, a gate. And its absence still shapes the way you see yourself today. Long before religion divided nations, and long before modern science tried to dissect the heavens into cold mechanics, the stars were humanity's first mirror. In the deep silence of Mesopotamian nights, priests of Babylon stood atop ziggurats with eyes fixed on the shimmering river of stars. They believed the sky was not just a map of light, but a language, one written in the motions of constellations. The zodiac was born here, not as a parlor trick or personality test, but as a cosmic code. Each constellation along the sun's yearly path marked not only time, but transformation. Aries heralded beginnings, Leo spoke of fire and rulership, Pisces whispered of endings and dissolution. And yet in every library, in every archive, the wheel was drawn with 12 signs. 12, the sacred number of order. 12 tribes of Israel, 12 Olympians, 12 apostles, 12 months. But here lies the first crack. The number of lunar cycles in a year is not 12. It is 13. 13 moons for one earthly cycle around the sun. 13 rhythms of nature. 13 beats in the drum of life. The zodiac, in its original primal form, mirrored this rhythm. It had 13 constellations along the ecliptic, not 12. And one of those constellations, Ophiuchus, the serpent bearer, was later struck out. Imagine it, a tall figure striding across the night sky, wrapped in the coils of a massive serpent. Ancient star maps showed him clearly. He stood between Scorpio and Sagittarius, neither one thing nor another, but a threshold. Ophiuchus. In Greek myth, he was linked to Asclepius, god of medicine and healing, the one who learned the secrets of life and death from the serpent itself. His staff, entwined with a single serpent, still marks hospitals and pharmacies to this day. But as an archetype, Ophiuchus was far more than a healer. He was a challenger of limits. He stood at the door between mortality and eternity, carrying the wisdom of poison and cure, shadow and light. For the Babylonians, Ophiuchus symbolized the chaos of the 13th cycle, the cycle that breaks order, dissolves patterns, and demands rebirth. For Egyptian astronomer priests, his serpent was the Uraeus, a sign of inner fire, Kundalini energy rising, the crown of awakened kings. In every sense, Ophiuchus represented what societies fear most, the uncontrolled power of transformation. And so, in time, he disappeared. Why erase him? The answer lies in the politics of numbers. 12 is order. 12 divides neatly. 12 months in a year, 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. It satisfies the craving of empire for neatness and predictability. 13 is rupture. 13 is the moon cycle that defies the solar calendar. 13 is the prime number that refuses to conform. When the Roman Empire restructured time, they cut the year into 12 months, aligning with their obsession for military discipline and political control. Religious traditions mirrored this neatness. 12 apostles around Christ, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 Olympians. 12 became sacred not because of cosmic truth, but because of social utility. And 13? It was branded chaotic, unlucky, and eventually dangerous. The serpent bearer, whose constellation visibly lies along the sun's path, was excluded from the zodiac wheel. What had been a living mirror of transformation became a closed loop of 12. Tidy, symmetrical, easier to manage. But what happens when you erase a gate of transformation from the map of the soul? You erase the memory of that transformation from human psychology itself. Carl Jung once said, "The symbols of the self are naturally expressed in the heavens." Archetypes, those primal patterns of human experience, are not invented, they are discovered. They emerge in myth, in art, in ritual, and in the stars. Ophiuchus was the archetype of the healer who transforms through shadow. His serpent symbolized Kundalini, the coiled energy within the spine, waiting to rise. He embodied the threshold between endings and beginnings. To erase him was not only to adjust a calendar, it was to excise a part of the human psyche. Think of it. Without Ophiuchus, the zodiac cycle ends with Pisces, dissolution, before looping back to Aries, new beginnings. A neat, closed circle. But life is not a neat circle. Real transformation requires initiation, death, descent into shadow, confrontation with poison, and rebirth. Ophiuchus carried this initiatory energy. Without him, the zodiac became a closed cage, comfortable but incomplete. This is why, even today, many feel a deep disconnection with the traditional zodiac. They sense something missing, a restlessness, a hunger for a sign that doesn't exist on their chart, but lives in their soul. That missing gate is Ophiuchus. Across the ages, the serpent-bearer lingered like a ghost, visible in the sky, hidden from the charts, always there, always erased. And so we arrive at the first mystery. The zodiac was not always 12, it was 13. And the 13th was the serpent-bearer, the healer, the challenger, the alchemist of shadow. His removal was not accidental. It was a political decision, a cultural surgery, a spiritual amputation.
But here is the truth. The stars do not erase themselves. Ophiuchus is still there, straddling Scorpio and Sagittarius, carrying the serpent. He has never left the sky. Only we have forgotten him. Part 2 will ask the question, What does the serpent itself mean? Why has the symbol haunted humanity across every civilization? From Egyptian temples to Mesoamerican pyramids, from Indian yogis to Greek healers. Because to understand why Ophiuchus was erased, we must first understand what he carried. The serpent.
The serpent, a creature feared, demonized, worshipped, and revered. It slithers through our myths, through our sacred texts, through the deepest layers of our psyche. And in the figure of Ophiuchus, the 13th sign, it is the serpent that reveals the secret. Before we feared the snake, we bowed to it. Archaeologists excavating ancient shrines in Anatolia and Mesopotamia have found snake carvings older than the pyramids themselves. In these early cultures, the serpent was no mere animal. It was a living metaphor for life force. Its ability to shed its skin became a symbol of rebirth. In Egypt, the cobra crowned the pharaoh's forehead. Called the uraeus, it represented the fiery life force that both protected the ruler and struck down enemies with divine authority. The serpent was not a curse, but a sign of awakening. In India, the serpent rose again in myth. Naga, semi-divine serpent beings, guardians of wisdom. Kundalini, the coiled serpent energy, was believed to rest at the base of the human spine, awaiting the moment of awakening to surge upward through the chakras. Even in Mesoamerica, thousands of miles away, the great serpent Quetzalcoatl represented creativity, wisdom, and the bridge between heaven and earth. The serpent was everywhere, across continents, across millennia. Why? Because humanity instinctively saw in it something universal. The cycle of death and renewal, the coiled energy of transformation. And it is this serpent that Ophiuchus carries in the stars.
The Greeks gave the serpent-bearer a name, Asclepius. Asclepius was a mortal who became a god. He learned the art of healing from Chiron, the wise centaur, but his greatest teacher was the serpent itself. According to myth, he witnessed a snake slither into his chamber and another arrive with a healing herb in its mouth to revive the fallen one. From that moment, Asclepius understood the serpent's power. Death and cure were twins. With this knowledge, he resurrected the dead. His skill threatened even the gods, for if man could conquer death, what power remained for Zeus? Out of fear, Zeus struck Asclepius down with a thunderbolt, but then, regretting the act, placed his image among the stars as Ophiuchus. The serpent on his staff became the ultimate emblem of medicine, surviving thousands of years. Even today, when you walk into a hospital, the staff of Asclepius, serpent coiled around wood, greets you. It is the hidden survival of Ophiuchus's archetype in plain sight. But note the paradox. In modern culture, serpents became associated with evil, with temptation, with chaos. And yet, when we need healing, when we enter spaces of medicine, the serpent is quietly there, carved into emblems of trust.
Every archetype is dual, and none more so than the serpent. In nature, venom can kill, but in careful measure, venom heals. Modern pharmacology still extracts compounds from snake venom to treat diseases and create life-saving medicines. Spiritually, the serpent carries the same duality. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent tempts Eve to eat the fruit of knowledge, forever branding it as the symbol of sin in Christian imagination. In Hindu Tantra, the serpent represents Kundalini. When awakened, it brings illumination. When suppressed, it festers as fear, anger, or shadow. For the Greeks, the serpent was both plague and cure. Apollo, god of healing, was also god of destruction, his arrows bringing disease as well as relief. To carry the serpent, as Ophiuchus does, is to hold the paradox of existence itself, the awareness that destruction and regeneration are inseparable. This is why Ophiuchus was dangerous. His archetype could not be neatly labeled, could not be reduced to the comfort of black and white morality. He was the liminal figure, standing between Scorpio, death, shadow, and Sagittarius, rebirth. He did not erase death, he transformed it. The serpent is not outside us, it is inside, coiled at the base of the spine, in our very DNA, in the rhythms of life and death. To deny it is to deny our own potential. To awaken it is to step into transformation. Ophiuchus represents this awakening. He does not destroy the serpent, he carries it. He bears the weight of its paradox, its danger, its cure. That is why his archetype is the healer alchemist, the one who faces the serpent instead of fleeing from it. But what empire could allow such an archetype to flourish? A figure who carries death and rebirth, who teaches humans that mortality is not final, who embodies the chaos of transformation. Such a symbol destabilizes order. As Christianity rose to dominance in the Roman world, serpent symbols shifted. The serpent was cast as Satan in Eden. 13 became a cursed number. The feminine cycles of 13 moons per year were rebranded as unclean, dangerous, or demonic. To erase Ophiuchus from the zodiac was not simply to tidy up astronomy, it was to censor an idea that within every person lies the power to heal, transform, and transcend through confronting their shadow. The serpent-bearer was never a simple sign. He was the embodiment of the human confrontation with paradox. To carry the serpent is to hold poison and cure in the same hand. To walk the path of Ophiuchus is to enter shadow, descend into death, and rise renewed. This is the sign that was erased, the sign that terrified priests and emperors, the sign that reminds us of our own power. But if Ophiuchus was struck from the heavens of human consciousness, the question remains, who exactly struck him down? Who had the power and the motive to rewrite the very code of the sky? The stars do not erase themselves. Constellations do not vanish from the heavens. If a sign was lost, someone made it so. The disappearance of Ophiuchus was no accident of astronomy. It was an act of war, spiritual, political, and psychological. Every empire in history has understood one truth. Control time, and you control the people. The Babylonians created the first calendars, aligning harvests and rituals to the movements of stars. The Egyptians synchronized their kingship with Sirius rising on the horizon. But Rome did something different. Rome reorganized time itself. Julius Caesar introduced the Julian calendar, 365 days divided into 12 months. This system was elegant, efficient, and easy to impose across a sprawling empire. 12 was clean. 12 was divisible. 12 meant order. But this neatness was not neutral. It came with a cost. The 13th cycle, the lunar rhythm, the feminine measure of time, was cut away. The serpent-bearer, Ophiuchus, whose presence aligned with that 13th beat, was silenced. Why 12? Because 12 is the empire's dream. 12 months in the year. 12 hours of day, 12 of night. 12 signs of the zodiac, a wheel that turns but never destabilizes. 12 apostles, 12 tribes, 12 Olympians. 12 whispers of perfection, symmetry, completeness. 13, by contrast, is the rebel number. It is crime, indivisible, resistant to neat categories. It is the number of the moon's cycles, the number of the goddess, the rhythm of blood and tide. Where 12 gives order, 13 gives disruption. Where 12 builds cathedrals, 13 cracks their foundation. For a rising empire desperate for control, 12 was salvation, 13 was threat. Ophiuchus was dangerous not only because he was the 13th, but because of the serpent he held. In older cultures, the serpent was divine wisdom, but under the growing dominance of Christianity, the serpent was recast as villain. In Eden, the serpent lured Eve into knowledge and was punished as the eternal enemy of God's children. In sermons, serpents became metaphors for sin, chaos, temptation. In medieval imagination, serpents curled at the feet of demons and witches. To keep Ophiuchus in the zodiac would mean keeping a serpent in the heavens, visible, honored, even central. For a religion building its foundation on the defeat of the serpent, this was intolerable. Thus the constellation was not destroyed, but deliberately ignored. The official zodiac became 12. The 13th faded into whispers, into folklore, into heresy.
Everywhere the serpent was once sacred, it was recast as evil. And with it, Ophiuchus disappeared, not from the sky, but from the sanctioned imagination of mankind. We must be clear, the erasure of Ophiuchus was not a scientific correction. It was a calculated act. By choosing 12 signs instead of 13, empires imposed a cosmic order that mirrored their earthly hierarchies. Predictable, obedient, circular. The 13th sign, with its serpent and its symbolism of death and rebirth, threatened this order. It taught that power comes not from conformity, but from transformation. It honored feminine cycles and shadow work, elements despised by patriarchal institutions. It dared to suggest that death itself could be transcended, that human beings carried divine fire within them. This was not just inconvenient, it was heretical.
And so, like books burned in secret chambers, like goddesses renamed as demons, Ophiuchus was erased. The war on the 13th sign had consequences far deeper than calendars. It shaped psychology itself. By cutting away the archetype of the serpent bearer, society lost its symbolic guide for transformation. Instead of confronting shadow, people were taught to fear it. Instead of embracing cycles of death and rebirth, they were taught to cling to order, to fear disruption, to label change as sin. The absence of Ophiuchus left a hole in the collective psyche, and into that hole fear grew. Fear of chaos, fear of feminine power, fear of the serpent within. Ophiuchus was not defeated in the heavens. He was censored on earth. The war on the 13th sign was a war on transformation itself. A war on the serpent, on the feminine, on the healing that comes from confronting death and shadow. The wheel of 12 turned on clean and symmetrical, but it was a cage, not a map. And so we are left with a haunting question. If an empire could rewrite the sky to fit its own order, what else was rewritten? What other truths, what other gates were erased from our collective memory? That is where Part 4 will take us, into the shadow left behind, the psychological wounds of forgetting, and the haunting absence of the serpent bearer in our inner lives.
When something is erased from history, it does not vanish. It lingers like a ghost, haunting the edges of memory. The removal of Ophiuchus, the 13th sign, was more than an astronomical edit. It was a psychic wound, a fracture in the soul of humanity, and its shadow still follows us. Archetypes are mirrors. Without them, the psyche cannot see itself clearly. Ophiuchus was the mirror of transformation, the healer who walks through death, the bearer of the serpent that holds both poison and cure. Without him, the zodiac cycle was closed, sanitized, neatly 12. But the human soul is not neat. It is chaos and order, shadow and light, life and death intertwined. By erasing Ophiuchus, society lost the archetype that legitimized the journey into shadow. Without him, there was no map for descent, no guide for transformation. What happens when a culture denies transformation? It stagnates. It fears change. It demonizes the very processes that could heal it. From the Middle Ages onward, fear became the organizing principle of life. Fear of chaos, fear of feminine cycles, fear of death, fear of the serpent.
Without Ophiuchus, the serpent was cast only as enemy. The archetype of the healer was split in two: saints in the light, witches in the dark. Healers who worked with herbs, poisons, or serpents were branded heretics. This collective amnesia created an imbalance. People celebrated order, obedience, light, but suppressed darkness, transformation, shadow.
Psychology calls this repression. Spiritual traditions call it forgetting. Both lead to the same outcome: fear. I don't know why, but I feel something missing in me. The shadow of forgetting is not a mythic story alone. It is a daily reality. A world that fears endings, that avoids transformation, that medicates the serpent within, rather than awakening it. Carl Jung taught that when we suppress the shadow, it does not disappear, it acts out unconsciously. Without Ophiuchus, without the archetype of the serpent-bearer, society lost its mythic permission to face death and rebirth as natural stages of growth. Instead, people clung to stability, fearing disruption. Trauma cycled through generations, unresolved. Change became terrifying. Divorce, career shifts, spiritual awakenings were treated as crises rather than initiations. Anxiety and depression rose as symptoms of a psyche denied its own transformation. It is no coincidence that in cultures where Ophiuchus was erased, the number 13 became unlucky. Friday the 13th, branded with terror. Hotels skipping floor 13. Airplanes omitting row 13. These are not superstitions. They are echoes of a deeper amnesia. The fear of the 13th cycle, the forgotten gate. The 12-sign zodiac forms a perfect circle. Aries begins, Pisces dissolves, and then back again to Aries. But a circle of 12 without 13 is a loop without an exit, a cycle without initiation, a wheel that turns but never evolves. Life under such a zodiac feels safe but suffocating. It explains why so many feel trapped in repeating patterns, unable to break free. The missing archetype of Ophiuchus was the crack in the circle, the secret door out of repetition and into transformation.
By erasing it, humanity was left circling endlessly. Look around, and the shadow of forgetting is everywhere. In our obsession with youth, as if aging and death are failures rather than initiations. In our fear of chaos, our desperate need to control nature, time, even our own emotions. In our demonization of the serpent, casting it only as evil in films, myths, and nightmares. In our collective avoidance of shadow work, trauma integration, or any descent into the dark. The absence of Ophiuchus has left astrologically incomplete. It is as if humanity has been walking with only half a map, blind to the terrain that requires courage, surrender, and rebirth. This is the shadow of forgetting, a world that recognizes the light but not the dark, beginnings but not endings, order but not transformation. Without Ophiuchus, humanity looks into the mirror and sees only half its face. The erasure of the 13th sign was not simply an astronomical revision. It was a wound, a psychic surgery that cut away the archetype of transformation. The result, a collective amnesia, a shadow that whispers in anxiety, in superstition, in fear of change. But shadows cannot remain hidden forever. What is suppressed returns.
And just as Ophiuchus lingers in the night sky, so too does his archetype stir in the depths of the human soul. Memories survived, not in mainstream astrology, but in secret lineages, mystery schools, and hidden traditions. For while the empire erased his name from the sky, the serpent-bearer's wisdom never truly died.
When the empire erased the 13th sign, it did not vanish. Knowledge never truly dies. It hides. It waits. And for centuries, a scattered brotherhood and sisterhood, the secret keepers, carried the memory of Ophiuchus, preserving it like an ember smoldering beneath ashes. When official charts reduced the zodiac to 12, the serpent-bearer slipped underground. In Hermetic texts of late antiquity, scholars whispered of a hidden 13th gate, a path of initiation beyond the Wheel of 12. In Gnostic Gospels, Christ was described not only as a savior, but as a healer who conquered death, an archetype strikingly similar to Ophiuchus. In Kabbalah, the serpentine ascent of the Kundalini-like tree of life hinted at the same transformative energy. These fragments were not accidents, they were survival codes, ways of ensuring that the archetype of Ophiuchus, the healer, the serpent-bearer, the transformer, was not lost entirely. The medieval alchemists were among the most daring secret keepers. They spoke not openly, but in symbols, the serpent devouring its own tail, Ouroboros, the philosopher's stone that transformed base matter into gold, the alchemist who died and was reborn within his own vessel. Each of these was a mask for Ophiuchus. The Ouroboros mirrored the serpent-bearer's lesson, life and death feeding each other. The philosopher's stone was not physical gold, but the transformation of the soul, the very essence of the lost 13th sign. The alchemist, holding the serpent within the flask, was Ophiuchus himself, reborn as symbol. Alchemy was never about chemistry alone. It was about remembering what the empire had erased, that within shadow lies transformation, and within poison lies medicine.
Throughout history, secret schools of initiation preserved fragments of the serpent wisdom. In Eleusis, initiates drank a potion said to awaken visions of death and rebirth. Among the Druids, serpent symbols appeared on sacred staffs and stone carvings. In the East, tantric and yogic traditions carried the serpent fire, Kundalini, through teachings hidden from the uninitiated. Among indigenous shamans, serpents appeared in visions induced by sacred plants, guiding the healer to realms of death and back. Each tradition, though separated by geography and time, preserved the same archetype, the serpent-bearer as the one who descends, heals, and returns. Though the empire silenced his name, the serpent-bearer appeared again and again, in symbols, in rituals, in whispers carried across oceans, always hidden, always alive. One symbol, above all, betrayed the survival of Ophiuchus, the staff of Asclepius. Even as the serpent became demonized in Christian sermons, the medical world never abandoned the staff. Hospitals, universities, and healers across Europe kept the image, a rod with a serpent coiled around it. It was Ophiuchus in plain sight, his archetype stripped of myth, but preserved in symbol. To heal was to carry the serpent. Every physician, knowingly or not, became an inheritor of the forgotten sign. While official institutions erased Ophiuchus, women often carried his memory. Midwives using herbs and knowledge of cycles were accused of witchcraft, yet in truth they embodied the serpent wisdom, balancing poison and cure. Wise women spoke of 13 moons in a year, keeping track of cycles the empire denied. Folk healers in villages across Europe, Africa, and the Americas invoked serpents in chants and rituals, protecting communities when official religion offered only dogma. These women, persecuted as witches, were in fact secret keepers of Ophiuchus, the serpent-bearer disguised in human form. Why did these traditions hide their knowledge instead of proclaiming it openly? Because archetypes have power. To remember Ophiuchus is to remember that transformation cannot be controlled by empire or church. To awaken serpent energy is to awaken sovereignty of the soul. For centuries, those who kept this knowledge had to speak in riddles, encode it in art, hide it in rituals, lest they be silenced by fire or sword. And yet, despite suppression, the ember survived.
Ophiuchus was not destroyed. He was hidden, preserved in fragments, in symbols, in the secret schools of those who refused to forget. The 13th gate remained, waiting for a time when humanity would be ready to open it once more. The serpent-bearer was erased from official history, but not from human memory. Hermeticists, alchemists, Gnostics, shamans, and healers all became his secret keepers. They knew that the 13th sign could never be destroyed because it is not only a constellation, it is a pattern in the soul. And now, as the world faces crises of meaning, identity, and survival, the question is no longer whether Ophiuchus survived. The question is whether we will remember him. We will witness the return of the 13th gate, the moment when the serpent-bearer steps once again into collective consciousness, offering humanity a chance to heal, transform, and reclaim what was lost.
These are symptoms of forgetting Ophiuchus. For centuries, humanity avoided shadow work, labeled chaos as sin, feared endings. Now the shadow returns with vengeance, demanding attention. And the 13th sign rises as guide, not to erase the shadow, but to walk us through it. The serpent rises again, in the body, in society, in the sky. What was erased returns because it cannot be destroyed. Transformation is inevitable. Ophiuchus teaches us that healing does not mean avoiding poison. It means transmuting it. Shadow must be embraced, not denied. Feminine cycles must be honored, not demonized. Chaos must be danced with, not feared. The 13th gate is the union of opposites, serpent and staff, death and rebirth, poison and cure, darkness and light. This is not abstract. It is personal. Each of us carries a serpent within, a coiled potential, terrifying, yet sacred. Awakening it requires courage, but only by facing it can we step into wholeness.
Why now? Why does Ophiuchus reappear in our consciousness today? Because humanity has reached a breaking point. The Wheel of 12 has spun for millennia, offering stability, but not evolution. Now the cracks are visible. People sense there is more, that something essential is missing. The re-emergence of the 13th sign mirrors this readiness. It is as if the stars themselves whisper, "The time has come. The 13th gate must open." The return of Ophiuchus is not about adding a 13th horoscope to magazines. It is about reintroducing the archetype of initiation. It is an invitation to stop running from endings, to see chaos as the soil of creation, to remember that healing requires descent into shadow, to awaken the serpent within and carry it with balance. This is not easy. It never was, but it is necessary. The 13th gate is no longer sealed. It opens to those who dare to step through, to those willing to face death of the old self, to embrace rebirth into wholeness.
You are more than your sun sign, more than a neat box of traits, more than 12 archetypes can explain. You are a cosmic seeker, a healer, a bearer of your own serpent. To reclaim Ophiuchus is to reclaim the forgotten part of your soul, the part that knows endings are not failures, that healing comes through shadow, that transformation is your birthright.
For centuries, you were told there were only 12. For centuries, the serpent bearer was hidden. But truth cannot be buried forever. The 13th gate is opening. The only question is, will you walk through it? Because the serpent is already within you, waiting, watching, ready to rise.
Erased from history, hidden for centuries, preserved in secret symbols, but now, in an age of crisis and awakening, the serpent bearer returns. The 13th gate is opening once more. Look around. Humanity is restless. The old structures of certainty are collapsing. Religions lose followers. Politics polarize. Technology accelerates faster than our souls can catch up. Climate change, pandemics, wars, loneliness, anxiety. The list grows endless. We stand at the edge of transformation, yet fear grips us. We cling to the Wheel of 12, order, control, repetition. But beneath the surface, something stirs, something we forgot. The archetype of Ophiuchus, the healer who confronts death, the bearer of the serpent, is rising again, not just in the stars, but in the collective psyche. Astrology itself is evolving, no longer confined to newspaper horoscopes or simplistic memes. Seekers today crave deeper systems. Many are rediscovering the 13th constellation, questioning why it was omitted, asking whether they might belong to Ophiuchus. But the truth is larger than identity. Ophiuchus is not about birthdays. He is about thresholds, about breaking the cycle of avoidance,
about facing what 12 signs alone cannot explain, the necessity of death and rebirth in the soul's journey. Astrology is returning to its root, not as prediction, but as initiation. We live in a time of collective shadow. Unresolved trauma resurfaces in movements for justice. Climate disasters remind us of cycles we tried to deny. Global mental health crises reveal how deeply we suppress transformation.